Welcome to That's Good Parenting, the podcast that helps parents get simple results from experts. And you know what? Sometimes it even helps us have better kids and better dogs as well. Today, we're talking about something that touches so many families' lives, adding a pet to your home. You know, pets can bring love, laughter, and teach us, our kids, about empathy, but they also bring challenges that maybe we're not always prepared for. Today, my guest knows all about that. Her name is Amy Castro, and she is the host of Pet Parent Hotline. And before we begin, Amy, would you just take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners in case they don't know who you are yet and tell them what you do?
Sure. I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. So I have a business. I do communication training for humans. So try to keep them in line. But I also am the founder and president of Starlight Outreach and Rescue. So I've seen the pet world from the inside of rescue, and I've personally had come through my home more than 4,000 pets. So I know what it's like to bring a new pet into your home. And so the Pet Parent Hotline, the podcast it started from conversations that I was having with people who were calling the rescue looking basically to surrender their pets. And I hate to see a good family, a good person give up their pet. And so I thought I can either answer these questions one-on-one on phone calls, or I can start a podcast and answer the questions that I get and hopefully reach more people. I mean, my goal is 100% to, if I could have all shelters and rescues go away, I would be glad for that we didn't need those anymore. I think that's highly unlikely, but I'd sure like to see a lot less of them.
Yeah, I feel like so many parents get dogs or cats in hopes that this is going to be their kid's new best friend. And I know that in reality, when you add a pet, it really changes how your family, their daily rhythm of things, and even like the stress levels. So, what's one thing already, just off the top of your head, that you wish parents really already knew before they even got their family pet?
I think that they need to know what it is that they're looking for beyond the single word dog, puppy, cat, hamster, whatever it might be. We spend a ton of time researching buying a car. And we don't go to a car lot and just say, give me anything, or let the mood hit me. We go with a list of things. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Sorry. Do you hear that in the background?
No.
Oh, never mind then.
Okay.
Um, I'll start that again. My cat is doing a reverse sneeze on the bed, as long as you can't hear it. Okay.
Yeah, you're
So what I wish is that people would go into getting a pet with some criteria beyond just a single word. I'm looking for a dog. I'm looking for a puppy, a cat, whatever, hamster, whatever it might be. I think we spend more time researching the car that we're going to get, and we don't just go to a car lot and say, just give me whatever, or let me see what mood hits me and I'll buy that. We go in with a list, and we are looking for certain gas mileage and certain number of seats and towing capacity, whatever we're looking for, and we use that to screen what we're going to consider. And we absolutely need to be doing kind of the same thing when it comes to a pet, basically to avoid the spontaneous, emotional, or impulsive decision that we sometimes end up getting when you go to a shelter or a rescue and you see all the little sad faces.
You know, it's funny. I remember our first dog that we got, we decided based off of which one came to us first. And I've always heard that was a good way, but honestly, like if we had gone into it with the perspective of we want one that does this and make sure the parents did the same things and really checked out what the breed was even like and what problems they had and what personality quirks or benefits they had, that would have been probably a totally different adoption at that point. We did great, but it wasn't without surprises and lots of obstacles along the way. So, and that's what you're saying. If they did that research, that would probably solve a lot of it.
100%. I've had people, one of my first podcast episodes was about a friend who had called me looking for do you know somebody who breeds this kind of dog? And I never try to chastise anybody. I mean, I do believe that there is a need and a purpose for purebred dogs. But what I want to know is why that? Why are you looking for that? What do you hope that's going to bring to you? What do you know about that? In the end, she actually ended up adopting a dog from a rescue that was not that breed. And that's okay. It's really about finding, to me, it's all about fit. What, doing your homework so that you get the right fit pet for you and your family to minimize the chaos that comes from bringing a new pet in. I mean, it's always going to be a change, like you mentioned. It's going to be a change to your routines and things like that. But the more that you've prepared for it, the less of a slap in the head it tends to be when it happens.
And sometimes it really is that, exactly
Yes, it
that.
is.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the rescue because I think a lot of people, beyond wanting purebreds, they also have the terms rescue and shelter kind of interchangeably used. And I know that they're not the same. So, can you explain the differences between adopting from a shelter versus working with a rescue organization and how they're different?
That's a great question because you're right. People do blend them together. And there is overlap, because it is terminology. Sometimes people use different words. But to me, there's kind of two, maybe three sides of things, but we'll just focus on two. A shelter is generally going to be run by a government entity. So a county shelter. I live in Alvin, Texas. We have the city of Alvin Animal Control, and they have a shelter. So a shelter is going to be, in general, a facility that their primary responsibility is going to be picking up stray and abandoned animals and basically turning them around as quickly as possible. So oftentimes a shelter will pick up an animal, they hold it for 3 days, an owner doesn't claim it, and if it is safe and adoptable, and that's a whole gray area right there, they put it on the adoption floor and then it's available for you to come and pick. They don't generally know as much about the animal as you probably need to know. So you're taking a little bit of a more chance. But when you do adopt from a shelter and you do your homework, you're probably more likely to be saving a life because that's another thing that people get very honed in on. They'll say things which makes no sense. I don't want to adopt from a kill shelter, one that euthanizes pets. Well, that's where you really should be going first because that's where you're saving the life. Whereas if it is a no-kill shelter, the odds are that that animal's got a much better chance. So there's subtleties in there as well. But if you've got a city of fill in the blank shelter, then that's kind of how it runs. On the rescue side, rescues are private entities. They should be nonprofit, so I would definitely look for that. But it's a much wider range. There are rescues that have facilities that they've either purchased or donated to them. My rescue, Starlight Outreach and Rescue, is a foster-based rescue. So we take in animals and then they live in volunteers' homes. And you might find that rescues will hold on to animals longer. They may know more about that animal because it's lived in someone's home versus living in a kennel in a facility that I work at from 9 to 5. So those are some of the differences. The other thing that you'll find when it comes to adopting a pet, and again, we're talking about the two extremes of the experience, is that it's going to be easier and less hoops to jump through in general to adopt from a shelter than from rescues. Some rescues have very extensive processes to adopt. They might want to come look under your bed. Okay, maybe not really under your bed, but they do home visits, they do background checks, they do all these other things, whereas a shelter might just do an application and say, this is a fit or not a fit, but they're probably not going to come to your home, check your fence, check your yard, things like that. So be prepared when you go with a rescue that it might be a little bit more of a process than it would be walking into your city shelter.
I love the idea of the animals living in people's houses because that it's so much more revealing than being in a pen with a whole bunch of other dogs. I mean, you
Right.
still get information either way, but seeing how they react to other animals, cats, kids, all of the things, that's so much different.
And it's hard to judge an animal in a shelter. It's always because you're a stranger and it's a strange environment. But I've had many times because I volunteered at a shelter for 10 years. And when you go and you take a family down the dog aisle, let's say, everybody goes ballistic. And so you're going to have the ballistic ones, and then you're going to have the ones that are terrified by all the noise and hiding in the corner. And neither one of those seems super desirable, but you're not getting a clear picture of what that animal's going to be out of that cage and out of that environment. And that's the sad reality sometimes with pets, because uh, as a volunteer, I would try to steer people towards something I felt like was a good fit based on my conversation with them. And then the animal doesn't show well. That's because it's acting wild and excited. And it's like, let's take it out. Let's see what it's like outside of the cage environment. So that's an ideal situation. At least get to see the animal outside of that environment.
Okay, let me ask you this. So when families decide to get dogs, do they often bring their kids? And if they bring their kids, is there always a classic promise of, I'll take care of the dog. I promise it'll be mine. I'll take care of it. Or do you see that a lot? And does it tend to not pan out?
Come on, moms and dads, you know already how it's going to pan out. Give me a break. I think it depends on the age of the child. I think that, and I tell this to parents all the time, that if you're going to get a pet, you better love it and look forward to doing all of the care, because the odds are you're going to be doing all or some of it. If nothing else, you'll be the one taking it to the vet because you're going to have to deal with that. So I always say, if you don't want a pet, I had this happen the other day, a young woman, and she was older. I mean, she was an adult, but living at home. And as the conversation progressed, it was quite obvious to me that her mother did not want a pet. And she already had started saying things like, it better not. And it's like, I don't think this is going to be a good fit, because I already see where the fighting is going to start down the road. So I would say go into it knowing you're going to probably do everything, or at least most of the work.
Yeah. And do you have, I mean, that was actually one of my other questions was, even with the best preparation, even with the best planning, the research, sometimes animals just don't get along with the family right away. And there might be a settling period. Is that typical for a lot of families? Like they'll get a pet and then they're overwhelmed by, the change and what all this means. And then how do they fix that? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there's always going to be a change, because an animal is, whether it's come, even if it's come from a home environment, that would be the ideal, right? It wasn't in your home environment. So it's going to be more guarded, more careful, more this or that. I mean, what you see is not what you get when you first bring that animal home. And so you've got to be prepared for that adjustment period. And it's always, people will oftentimes turn around in 24. I've had people try to return an animal and I mean, I've allowed them to return the animal, but called to return an animal less than 24 hours after they brought it home. And it's going to take time for that animal to adjust and to get used to your routines and to really show its true personality and really show how well does it get along with your kids or your other pets. And the one thing I would say along that is follow the advice of the facility you're getting the animal from for adapting that animal to your home. And that's also part of your homework. If you don't get that advice, is to think about, what do you do when you first bring it home? How do you introduce it to everybody? Where do you keep the pet? There's lots of great information about how to make that transition smooth to decrease a bad outcome.
Yeah. Hold on. I don't want to stop you. Okay, there she is. Come over here, Bree. Sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, oh no, she's quiet. Where is she doing? What are you doing? So let me think really quick. Because we've been talking about some of the challenges of having pets. What are some of the positives of having pets? And do you have a particular story where maybe a pet really made a huge difference in a family's life?
I think all of the stereotypical things that we hear about pets and what they bring to life, unconditional love. Yes, I do agree. Even though I just did an episode about why you shouldn't get a pet for your child under the age of 5, and one of the examples I gave is because it's not going to teach them responsibility because they're 4, that kind of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, yes, it can teach children responsibility. It can teach them compassion. It can teach them about putting something else above themselves, the inconvenience of taking the dog for a walk in the rain because he's got to go potty, that kind of thing. It's, there are a lot of benefits, and they do fully, if you're doing things right, they do fully become part of the family. And when you lose them for whatever reason down the road, out of age or old age, you'll feel the gap. I mean, I can, even as somebody who's run a rescue and has had so many animals, and I feel like I'm a bit jaded to it. When you lose one of your own personal pets, you feel it when they're not there anymore. And then you remember how much they added to your life. So, a lot of benefits.
Do you have any tricks for parents about making the connection? Because I bring this up because I think a lot of times when the pet seems like more energy, more work, parents are maybe straddled between their kids needing the attention, the pets needing attention. We lose that sense that this is a member of the family, that this dog or cat has feelings and emotions. So do you have any tricks that you teach people as how to connect to that animal a little bit easier?
Well, I think it starts with getting, and I hate to keep stressing this, but getting the right animal in the first place. The energy level, the family that is maybe not as active, but they get an animal that has an extreme need for exercise. It's like if you want to get something that has a high energy dog, for an example, that needs to run, you better have a runner in your family, because letting them run around the backyard is not going to work. And so finding the right fit pet for you in the first place. And then I think, just like you carve out time, as you should, hopefully, as a parent, you carve out time to spend one-on-one time with one of your children if you've got multiple children, or you try to carve out a little bit of time for yourself to have some alone time or some me time or whatever you want to call it, to carve out that time for the pet too. And what I have to do with my pets, because even though I don't have as many rescue pets at the moment, I still have 6 animals in my house, living in my house. And so I try to make a point, even something as simple as closing the bedroom door in the morning while I'm sitting having my coffee, and and giving attention to one of them at a time for 15 minutes, brushing or petting or whatever it might be. But you've got to kind of carve that time out. The other thing I would say too is give yourself grace a little bit when you can't, because so much of things in life are seasonal or stages. And so, yeah, maybe when your kids are really little, you can't do it as much, but maybe you can make up for it in other ways. So it's a balancing act for sure.
I know we have if listeners don't know this already, we have a Portuguese water dog, and it's a high energy dog. She is still young and she does require a lot of attention. And what I've been learning, and it's been accidentally more than anything, is that if we try to give her attention just through physical exercise, she wants more physical exercise. And I think some of this parent owning or this dog owning is also about learning what else you can do with them besides just one thing. So,
Yeah,
like for her, it's like she loves for us to hide her toys and have her find them. And I'm shoving them into cupboards, I'm putting them underneath things, and same thing with treats. That wasn't something that we ever did with our first dogs because they didn't need that. That wasn't the kind of personality they were.
right,
So I think that kind of goes back to this whole thing of like relating to them and finding what they enjoy. Do you have
right.
other tricks or things like that that you've heard work well for families to help entertain their dogs besides taking them for walks?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think, broadly beyond just dogs too, the what people are focusing on a lot these days instead of exercise is enrichment. So what you're describing is an example of enrichment, seeking something, especially for a dog that is inherently maybe bred to do that. Just Even just changing up, and I'll tell you one thing I did that was a very interesting thing. So I live on 7 acres, and I always let the dogs out in the backyard. They've got a huge backyard. It's probably an acre just for the backyard part. And I did an episode where somebody was talking about enrichment and just being in a different location to smell different stuff, see different trees, whatever it might be. So I started letting them out. The front is fenced too. Letting them out the front door. Oh my gosh, these animals would at 4:30 in the afternoon, they would get so excited sitting by the front door to go out the front door. It's like it's the same yard, but it's different smells. You know, there have been barn cats up there that there wouldn't have been in the backyard. Maybe there's a different squirrel. There's goats that live across the street and cattle next door. So there's, I think, looking for just different locations and not doing the same old thing. And I think it also goes back to the pet itself. You know, cats, just as an example, cats still need enrichment, but your opportunities for doing that are going to be maybe easier and maybe more confined to your home. And so, knowing going into it, what am I able to provide this pet? Am I able to take it to a different park every day to smell different stuff? If the answer is no, then maybe, you know, looking at a different type of pet where you can provide what it needs. The other thing I would say too, we've been talking about puppies and bringing home puppies, is that adopting an older pet that maybe has less energy, less need for training, things like that, so that what time you do have is not focused on the I must teach it to come when I call it. If that's already done, then you can focus on things that might be a little bit easier, like enjoyable activities versus tasks, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. I think that's something that when people think of dogs, they think of puppies first. But what you're saying makes so much sense because those dogs have already gotten some of the training. And they also have the ability to reason through without being impulsive and crazy. Like puppies, they tend to. They just have so much energy and excitement. That's what they do.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think adopting, you know, especially if you have young children, adopting an older, and it doesn't have to be old, old. I mean, it could be 3 years old or something like that, because with an older animal, what you see is what you get. You know, a puppy might exhibit a certain personality and be completely different as an adult. But for the most part, an adult's personality is already established. And so if they're chill and mellow, they're probably going to remain relatively chill and mellow. And if that's what you're looking for, then you're seeing it right up front versus I get a puppy, it's bouncing off the walls, and then I think, oh, surely it will calm down later. Maybe. You know? And maybe not. Maybe it'll be like that till it's 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, you just don't know at this point. Okay, as a children's book coach and illustrator, I like to think of things in story sense. So, what would be the right story that needs to be told if I was a family who wants to adopt a pet? What would I need to have in order to be ready to do that?
I think the mindset that any animal, I don't care if it's a goldfish in a bowl or a dog and everything in between, to you, that is part of your life. To them, you are their whole world, like their whole life. And they rely on you for everything. And you are their everything. And I think when we remind ourselves of that, it allows us to be much more empathetic and understanding with their non-human quirks that sometimes get us annoyed or that bother us. Like, why can't they just understand? You know, and we have a lot of high expectations, but I think keeping that foremost in our minds, or that is the lesson, is that we are their everything, and use that as your filter for how every interaction that you have with them.
It's such a huge statement to think about that, that you're literally their everything. I think about that every once in a while, just in the house, even, like this is their territory. Okay, our dog gets on the couch. I allowed her to do that. Well, because she only has so much room and this is comfortable for her compared to the floor and all those kinds of things. But, it does give you like a different perspective when you know that, let's say you're going to be gone for multiple hours and they're waiting for you to come back, like literally waiting for you to come home. And they're crazy because you're home. And it's different when you think that is their world. I think if a lot of people thought that way, it definitely make that decision even more important for them to choose the right dog and to choose the right behavior that they want in their house.
Yeah, 100% true.
Oh, so okay. So we're not scaring anybody away from pets. We're
Nope.
encouraging them that if they choose wisely, it's going to be a lot smoother road for everybody. If you were to give them one really important piece of advice as a parent who's thinking about bringing a pet of some kind into their home, what is absolutely crucial for them to consider the very first thing?
to do all the homework and to have everything set and ready before you go looking for the pet so that you don't end up in a situation where you make that impulsive decision. So even something as simple as, you're going to go get again, it could be a goldfish. Do you already have the bowl? Have you already set it up? Do you know where it's going to be put? Do you have the food? Having everything ready just makes that transition into the home a lot more smooth versus what I see sometimes is people will, I'll get it and I'll bring it home and I'll put it in the bathroom and then I'll run out and buy all the stuff. And it's like, and that's just a simple example, but it's a, to me, a symptom of not being 100% prepared. Try to be as 100% prepared as you possibly can be.
And that's huge, actually. I was thinking even like the crates, where
Hmm.
a dog or a cat, depending on where your cat, most cats just choose where they sleep, but some places you don't want kids to sleep with a cat, let's say. Maybe your
Yeah,
kid has minor allergies and they'll do better if they sleep outside of their bedroom. All of
right,
those pieces. Yeah.
right. And you're going to need a place, with any animal that you bring home. It's not, and because we adopt out a lot of cats. You're not gonna, I don't care if you live in a two-bedroom apartment or a 4,000 square foot house. If you can't just bring a cat home and put it down on the floor and
See what
go
it
from
does.
there. It's just not, it's not going to work. It's going to disappear under a bed. It's going to not know where the litter box is. So where are you going to put that litter box and the food and the cat and close them in so they have a safe place to decompress and then start to venture out from your house? Thinking those things through are important. And another thing I want to stress too is you can get help with these processes, right? Instead of waiting, I think I've done several episodes with trainers about training, things like that. A lot of trainers are more than happy to go with you when you go to the shelter or if you visit a breeder and help you make decisions based on them helping you assess your goals. And so, take advantage of that because the money that you might spend doing that up front is going to be money you won't have to spend fixing a mistake later on.
So tell me more about that because that's new to me. So you actually can hire trainers to check your house out, or how does that work?
Well, you could. I mean, I've interviewed many trainers. As a matter of fact, did an interview fairly recently with a head person in a certification body. I won't name the name, but certification body for dog trainers. And I'm not saying every trainer you call is going to be willing to do these things, but there are trainers out there that would be more than happy to come over to your house, talk to you about what you're looking for in and this is going to probably be mostly dogs, right? What are you looking for in a dog? Assess your family, your lifestyle. It's probably less about your house because when you think about your house, dogs sleep like 18 hours a day or more. So it's not about how big your house, how small your house is, but it might be about your yard. It might be about what kind of crate you're planning on getting. Where are you going to put it? But I think the more important piece is helping you pick the animal because we don't have that expertise in looking at a dog interacting with other dogs at the shelter and knowing is that dog going to be aggressive towards other dogs or dominant or a challenge to train or whatever it might be, but a trainer would know those things. So getting the help up front is great. And if you don't, the other thing I would say is don't wait until a small problem becomes a big one. Get the help then. When you start seeing something that I don't like where this is working. I don't like the direction that this is going. Whatever the behavior is, get help with it because there's a lot of help out there.
This is maybe a question that is more an assumption than a real answer, but what usually stops people from asking for that help from the outsiders?
I think it is, sometimes it could be financial. They're afraid of how much it might cost to do that and the time element. But, because when you do go through training with a pet, it's not a magic fix. It's not like you're going to send that pet off someplace and have it come back perfect. Even though there are opportunities where you can send your pet away for training, you're still going to have to do the work when the pet comes back. And, if you have a trainer come to your home or you take a class somewhere, it's time. It's time that you have to put into it, but that time needs to be done anyway. And so at least you're doing it with professional guidance instead of just guessing. And maybe sometimes I think people don't understand what's the difference between this is normal and it's just going to go away and this is even if it's normal, it's not just going to go away. It's just going to get worse. Or they just don't have time. They're so busy with other things. They just keep putting it off, keep putting it off. And that's where I see a sad progression of people get a puppy, the puppy starts to get bigger, it starts to get possibly destructive, or it's knocking down the 4-year-old now and causing a lot of crying. So then the puppy gets moved to the backyard where it gets very little interaction and no training. And then it hits 2 years old and we've had enough. And then they're looking to rehome it. And there's a lot of opportunity that was missed along the way to make things better.
I wonder too sometimes if people would feel like they failed in some way or they made a bad decision. And so calling a trainer would feel like, okay, well, I'm admitting to my mistakes a little
Maybe,
bit.
yeah. I mean, you probably have a lot better insight into that than I do, but yeah, I mean, that's quite possible. It's like anything else, we think we can handle things and we don't ask for help when we need it on a lot of levels, especially as parents. You think you've got to have all the answers, and it's hard to admit that you don't.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, none of us are perfect, by the way.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to pets. I mean, they're furry kids is what it comes down to, and they need and require a lot different things than our own kids, but it's still similar in some way. I think it's kind of neat.
Oh yeah, and they go through stages and similar stages. There's the teenage years and the toddler years, and they just happen a lot sooner. So those teenage years come at about a year and a half, 2 years old versus 12, 13, 14 years old. So be prepared.
Ooh, it's like, yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind, especially
Hmm.
for people who feel like they've kind of mastered where their dog is if they're still young. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, Amy, can you tell us a little bit more about where people can find you and more about your podcast?
Sure. So the podcast, well, you can find me at the podcast on the podcast website. My contact information is on there, but it's petparenthotline.com is the website. And the podcast itself, if you wanted to listen to it, you can find it anywhere. Wherever you might listen to a podcast, we're there. So Apple, Spotify, all of the other platforms, or on the website if you want to listen to our website. What the podcast is based on the questions that I hear and the challenges that pet parents face. As I said earlier, my podcast is the goal is to answer those questions and help you get through those challenges. I have experts that come on the show because I certainly don't know everything. And, I've been wrong on a lot of things. And so I get experts to come on the show to talk about, everything from nutrition to behavior to how to bring home a new pet. We just did a whole series on crates and how to choose one, why they're good, and how to train your puppy or dog to use them. I think pretty much any topic that you might have a question about, there's probably an episode, and if there's not one, there's one coming because we want to get those questions answered.
I love it. And I've been on your website and or your podcast site and
Mhm.
I kept scrolling through like all the different topics, great topics. And I feel like if you're especially a new pet parent or even a pet parent who's just, got a new dog or cat, I think it has so much information there that it feels comfortable to listen to and get, kind of dig in deeper. So it's amazing. You should definitely check it out, listeners, for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Amy, I'm going to ask you one last question before we go.
Okay.
So, is there such a thing as a bad pet?
No. Okay, let me back that up. I think there are certain things that should not be pets. So in that instance, yes, that would not be a good a good choice. Like having a rattlesnake as a pet, probably not the best choice. But as far as, your average dog or cat, there are not bad animals because bad implies intentionality or cognitive choices. And so no, there are really only bad fit pets because you see it all the time in rescue. Something that was a disaster in one person's home is the love of the life in another person's home. And so it's really about you knowing what you need and finding the one that's a good fit for you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Again, I say if we can help people come up with exactly what they need by researching exactly what they want, it'll definitely make a perfect fit, as close to perfect as pets can be. for
Right.
a family like that. So I really encourage people to check out your podcast and to take that opportunity. And are you open to them reaching out to you with further questions?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, do you want to email me? The phone number that's on the podcast website makes its way to me. So there is a phone number out there. But if you want to email me, amy at petparenthotline.com, I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you've got questions, maybe we'll even do a whole episode on it and maybe have you on if you wanted to be. So all kinds of opportunities. But yes, I love being a resource for people. I don't know everything, but I will certainly point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Amy, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate all the information you've given us. And again, I really encourage listeners to find you, follow you, and give you an email out with their questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to get the word out.
Thank you.